Oh, look, there's me.
Yeah,
It moves based on, I think.
yeah, I think so.
It's supposed to be whoever's talking.
All right.
So you can tell them they
Yeah,
can
all
try
right,
log in.
David, yeah, we're up and running, so.
Your head separated from your body, that's what.
Looks a little grainy though. Not sure what that is.
All right, I think. Anybody waiting to get in? Or should we get
They
started?
should be able to just get it. There shouldn't be a wait.
Okay, there's no, you don't need to admit them.
I don't think so. I
Okay,
will if they pop up.
okay. All right, well, we're gonna call to order our meeting for the Climate Action Forum of Larkspur on April 8th. I'm sorry, we're starting a bit delayed, but we had some technical difficulties, so we'd like to start out with just a welcome and introductions. So I'm Sarah Margulies, and I'm the city council member who is the liaison for this group. I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Dan Schwartz, city manager, staff today. Happy to relinquish this role in 2 weeks.
I'm Lena Fikowski, Larkspur resident, and I also I work in the climate space, specifically in carbon removal and capture, and also come from a background in corporate sustainability.
David Mahler, I'm a Larkspur resident, and we lived here 42 years. Robin, even longer in the neighborhood anyway. And with the Larkspur Climate Group.
Robin Miller, same.
Okay.
I'm Brooke. I live in Corvadera and have for 16 years almost. I'm a Redwood student and a Corvadera Town Council Youth Commissioner.
What was the last one after?
Corvadera Town Council Youth Commissioner
Oh, wow.
for Parks and Rec. But that's not what I'm here today.
Thanks for
So
joining us.
yeah.
I'm glad you're able to attend. And we don't have anybody online as of yet. So we'll go ahead and get started. I don't have any updates for myself, although I did make an update to council last week about what our plan is this week. And I do want to bring it to everybody's attention that we have just hit like our 1 year mark. So we are just in time to deliver a set of priorities to council, and also timing it really well because we will be working on our budget. So we're aligning our priorities with a whole budget approval process. And so, I think we're lining up well to hopefully make some good progress, not just in calendar year 26, but in fiscal year 26, 27.
If I can interrupt, Katie says, link broken in the agenda doc. I don't want to slow the meeting down. I could get caught up later if tech doesn't work. More important to get others' inputs. So
She's right. The
Any thought on that?
meeting ID is wrong in the packet. So I'm trying to.
Should we text it to her, email it to her? What's
It's actually not. Well, we're not Brown Act, are we? So
No.
I can do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you're
Oh,
gonna
we're not Brown
email
Act?
the link?
We are not Brown Act, no.
Oh, that makes life so much easier.
Yeah, it does make life a little bit
Yeah,
easier,
did you
but
say you're
it's-
If I have her email.
You could say it to David and he could put it in his text.
Just like a photo.
Oh, yeah, right there. The webinar ID host.
It's
and
kind of
participant.
cut off though, so give me a sec to. Maybe you can take a picture.
The link up there?
Hang on, I'll put it on the notepad. There, maybe shoot her that picture.
much easier to just send her a link.
This is-
Okay. You want to shut down the?
No, I just trying to figure out what happened.
No, on the, you have the.
Oh,
notepad.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's not affecting the viewer.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on to item 2, which is a staff summary of CAF action items from our February 11th meeting. And Dan, I'm gonna turn these next 3 items over to you for updates, if you have them.
I don't have an update at the moment for the Climate Energy Partnership. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend their last meeting, so I haven't got anything there. Zero Waste Marin is currently working on a couple of programs to push out new information about compost recycling. There's been some challenges getting compliance with the most recent laws. And so Larkspur, for example, has 12 commercial users that are customers that are violating the law. So we're working with them to
What's the
correct.
subject again?
Composting.
Oh.
Every commercial property is supposed to now have a compost bin, and we have 12 that don't. So we're working on getting them into compliance.
Great.
I just received that mailer too, just, I don't know if you all did as well, from Zero Waste Marin. There was a composting mailer that came out that was bilingual, it had the message both in English and Spanish, and it talked about why it's important to compost. It gave tips on, you know, if you don't have a bin for your kitchen, you can actually put stuff in a Ziploc bag and put it in the freezer, and then put it in your green bin as it fills up to try to also, you know, mitigate any smells. So I thought it was informative. It didn't compel me that I already compost, but I didn't feel it like this is a very compelling message to compost other than it's the law.
Was it from Ren?
Dan, Katie says she's in.
No, it's from Zero Waste. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She's,
Okay.
so is Jody
Jody. Oh,
too.
perfect.
Yay. Welcome. Can you guys hear us?
It looks like we're.
Do you want me to make them panelists?
Yeah, please.
Are we muted? Or
No,
is that just?
it's a webinar, so till we move them out of the audience and into the panel, they should
Hi,
be able to-
everyone. Thank
Amy, can you hear
you.
us?
So sorry I can't be there. Thank
It
you.
looks like we're muted. Jody's
Oh, yeah,
muted for
that's why.
sure. Kate,
Oh, we're not. I think
Okay.
they just are, because our little like box doesn't have a mute. We're unmuted.
Katie, there you are.
I can hear you. Hi. Can you hear me?
We have to hold something up to the camera, like speak if you can.
Can you guys hear me?
Is the speaker
I'm gonna
on?
keep talking if you can hear me.
Try again, Katie.
Katie, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you.
I'm
they're
gonna run
coming
it through the
through.
laptop.
Okay.
Is it on?
And Jody as well.
Thanks, Katie. Jody, can you hear us? It looks like you're on mute, Jody. Maybe she's not at her computer.
Maybe she went to grab a snack.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're gonna keep moving here. So city updates and presentations. We need to adopt our February 11th Climate Action Forum meetings. And you know, I apologize because I don't think I published those for everybody. They usually are. It's been a little bit of a hectic because it's usually our assistant city manager who runs this with me, and so we've been moving between different staff members because she's out on maternity leave. She's coming back, and so as Dan said, he'll be happily turning the baton back over to Shannon. But I guess I can put those on the next minutes to approve instead, so that we'll have minutes from February as well as this meeting to approve. I apologize for not getting them into the agenda. That was my oversight. Dan has prepared an update on the city fleet electrification. It also is gonna have to be put into the minutes from this meeting. It's an Excel spreadsheet. I asked him to prepare it. It talks about all of the vehicles that we have in our inventory, which ones are electric and which ones are still fossil fuel, what the window is for replacement, like the life remaining on the vehicles. So it has a lot of good information that I think will support our initiatives that we're hoping to discuss tonight to push forward to council. And I think you guys will all like to have access to that, to just look at where we're at and see where we might be able to make some progress in the coming year. And so we will also make that part of the minutes from this meeting, and I will be sure to send it to all of you as we review the minutes from this meeting. I'll
I
provide
can't
that.
look at it right now.
Do you have it on
Or
your?
was that?
We might be able
I
to,
mean,
actually. That's not a bad suggestion.
And I'm just wondering, Katie, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you, if you can hear me.
We
Yeah,
can
we
hear
can.
you.
Oh,
Jody's not.
great. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kate.
Jody's on three.
So
I mean, I don't mind if you don't want to do it now. It's
It's-
just not understanding why.
Yeah, well, we didn't have the printouts and it was one of the printouts and then Dan just reminded me to go get it printed out and I just want to get the meeting
I'm
started.
gonna,
or we
I'll
can
call
finish
back
it.
up and put it on. the screen.
But he's putting it on the screen right now, Robin. And we have talked to this previously, so it's not necessarily new information. It's just formatted in a way that's easy for us to review. And to look at the lifespan of the vehicle and the likelihood of us replacing it with an electric vehicle in the coming years. Dan, can you zoom in on that a little bit, maybe? Get up at the top of the, yeah. So. Oh, that's nice. I don't know how you got that screen to stop glitching.
I'm very interested. Can we scroll over and see that column that's it sounds like forecast replacement date?
We don't forecast replacement dates for the city fleet because we tend to
estimated.
drive most of our vehicles for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, well,
So,
I guess it was estimated useful
Useful
life.
life.
I heard there was
Yeah.
some age issue.
Yep. Mhm.
yeah. But the concern we have is with Ford having backed out of the truck market almost entirely, it's unlikely that they're going to come out with an electric F-250 or larger vehicle.
Yeah.
And most of the non-electric fleet, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
So the good news for Larkspur is even if we have to continue to use combustion engine vehicles for these uses, as you can see, we don't drive them very much. So
They last a long time.
that's why they last a long time. We don't put a lot of miles. And a reminder, this is the city fleet. The more significant fleet, in our opinion, is the police fleet, which we are rapidly replacing with EVs.
Right.
So we're now up to 5 patrol cars. So,
Yeah, and we
Dan,
saw.
I want to say how impressed I was at the library meeting, how happy those policemen were to advertise their car. You want to see it? Come here. You want to? I mean,
they really like it. They
They-
said it's great.
They were
yeah.
doing a great job of promoting it.
Good.
Does electric include hybrid electric as well?
No, these are all full electric vehicles.
So that
So-
depends. That is a great question. It depends on the context. Generally, when people talk about
Yeah.
electric cars, it would just be full battery EV.
Mhm.
But there are certain like requirements or what am I thinking, statistics
Yeah.
that do include plug-in hybrids. So
Yeah.
like when the state of California is talking about their goals for electrification of vehicles,
That
they include
Yeah.
hybrids. So I'm just
Yeah.
saying, it's the same term, but
Yeah.
you have to look at the context. It doesn't always
Yeah,
mean the same
no,
thing.
the car I drive is hybrid electric. The car my mom drives is when it's like charges itself as it goes.
Yeah.
So
So that's
that's,
hybrid.
yeah.
There's hybrid,
Electric
there's
is-
plug-in
there's-
hybrid,
There's,
and
yeah,
there's full battery.
hybrid, yeah.
It's like, since you
I
brought
plug-
this up,
I
I'm
plug
going
in,
to
yeah.
share with this group something that some of you may know, this one knows, but most of you probably don't. That's a really important thing. It's the term renewable with regard to electric power generation. The term renewable with regard to electric power generation. When the state of California uses the term renewable,
Mhm.
and our community choice aggregator, Marin Clean Energy, MCE, uses the same thing. By the state definition, for purposes of the state meeting its targets for
Mhm.
renewable electric generation, they exclude hydroelectric power over 30 megawatts per station. Hydroelectric power bigger than 30 megawatts. In California, I don't know the exact number offhand, but there are several thousand megawatts of hydroelectric power that are stations bigger than 30 megawatts. They don't count as renewable. And literally, I'm going to give you the case. On the McCollum River, there's 2 hydropower plants within a mile of each other. They get their water from different sources.
Mhm.
One is just under 30 megawatts. It counts as renewable. The other one's 31 megawatts and it does not. My point is, we need to be careful when we
Yeah.
use the terms and ask exactly what you did,
Mhm.
what's included in this? Because especially around climate and energy type issues, oftentimes there are special definitions for certain uses.
Right.
And that's why when there was a speaker here one time from MCE
Mhm,
to the council
mhm,
and was talking about the mix of renewable in MCE's mix,
mhm.
he was using renewable as the state defines it for
Mhm.
purposes of renewable energy targets.
Right,
But he wasn't saying that to the council.
right,
And what was clear to me is the council was interested in is non-greenhouse gas emitting.
right.
And he was using the term renewable, but I could tell from the way he was using it, he was using the state term and not saying, oh,
Mhm.
by the way, that excludes large hydro,
Right.
which is kind of ridiculous. There's no difference in the renewability between a 29 megawatt hydropower plant and a 31 megawatt
Right,
hydropower plant. But
right,
that's how the state defined it.
right. But
Great question.
per the EV acceleration adoption plan, hybrid EVs are included in that plan. So in the context of this conversation, they are
Oh,
included.
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Great
All right.
clarification.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Hey, Andy. Right.
So does anybody have any further questions on this? I will attach this spreadsheet to the minutes from this meeting so that,
It's linked to the agenda too.
yeah.
I just have a comment. It's not so much a question. I have to say, I'm really glad to see this. And it sounds like there's a similar listing for the Central Run Police vehicles,
I
probably.
don't know.
No,
about
it's
that.
very different because that's a true replacement schedule. Like I said, Luxford doesn't really work on a replacement schedule. Our fleet's too small and we keep the
But-
vehicles too long.
But my point is that it's like when the information is gathered like this, and it may be that staff had this 5 years ago for all I know, but this is exactly the kind of information that helps members of the public understands what's going on with electrification of the city's fleet. So thanks for putting this together. Very helpful.
I have a quick question on this. I mean, maybe we'll come back to this when we go through the priority items.
Sure.
Because I know
This is,
city
yeah.
fleet,
Mhm.
so I can also hold off on my comment there, but I'm wondering if we'll come back to some of the specifics on the, that accelerated timeline and how we define that.
The
versus
replace, you mean the remainder of life of the vehicle?
For some of the ones that are shorter, that are, single digit lower numbers. towards the
Okay.
Bottom of the list.
Okay,
Um,
let's bring that into the conversation as part of this,
Item.
subset of topics underneath each of the overarching topics, okay? And we can just keep it on the screen for now. Okay, sorry, Dan, would you like to give a debrief on the presentation that was provided to council on Monday at our special meeting on March 30th regarding the green code by our new community director, planning and community director?
Yeah, so hopefully if you have a chance, you can go online and watch the video. Our relatively new community development director and our pretty much brand new building official put together a summary because they were sensing there's a lot of confusion about the current status of green building code. So the city has adopted the 2025 green building code in its entirety, but not the additional tiers. But a lot of what other communities have in their REACH codes are actually tied to the previous 2022 code. And a lot of those REACH codes were pulled in by the state into the overall state green building code. Not in its entirety, but it's pretty darn close. So in fact, as we go through your conversation about some of the priorities, some of these things were essentially accomplished in a certain way by just adopting the 2025 green building code. There's some nice tables. There's a report online from the last council meeting. I encourage you all, if you haven't looked at it, to take a look. Most of our major new development will be subject to it. We had a few 10-unit development type stuff that predate, so they're under the older code.
So I do have one comment on that presentation the other night at the council meeting. I had seemed to recall that when the city adopted the ordinance that adopted the 2025 code, that it included Cal Green Tier 1. And so I actually went back to the ordinance that was adopted January, whatever meeting, I'm not prepared for that tonight.
Mhm.
And I literally read what was adopted. And it did adopt the 2025 building code plus Cal Green Tier 1 only for certain things, not in its
The
entirety.
things that were already, essentially
But
adopted.
I just wanted to bring that up because I think the council heard it say it was just the 25 code and none of the Cal Green. And that's not what the ordinance that was adopted says. So I'm just, you might take a look at that and see what you think of it. It's right at the end of the ordinance. It actually lists the council hereby adopts, blah, blah, blah. And it careful reading, it looks to me like it does adopt part of Cal Green Tier 1, just for residential.
I think the confusion lies for me, to be wholly honest on this, is that we adopted this, I thought, actually last September at a
Well, we
meeting.
adopted all of the tiers for the 2025, but they were summarily rejected. We weren't even allowed to submit the application. So the action you took in January rescinded the action from September.
Or just supersedes it.
Supersedes it.
Okay, so, and what you were saying is
It's
in,
January action
did include the Tier 1 Cal Green.
Portions of it.
for certain categories, just
Okay.
for residential. It says
Okay,
adopts 2025 building code, Cal Green Tier 1, residential excluding blah, blah, blah.
It
okay,
adopted the tier ones that were in the prior code because you're allowed to bring them forward because you had already adopted them in
Yep.
the 2022 action. So
Aha.
I think the staff was trying to focus its presentation on what was new and not so much on
Got
what
it.
was carried forward. So,
Got it.
okay.
yeah.
Well, and if we need to, we could probably bring up that table, because it will be part of the discussion on our priorities that we're pushing forward. Okay, so, sorry, my computer keeps timing out. I need to figure out how to change that. You might be able to help me with that, Brooke. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna move into the meat of our topic tonight, which is the finalization of our top 5 priorities for the Climate Action Forum. So, Andy, you should also maybe, this is, Andy, do you wanted to say hi, everybody? Because you haven't been here for a
Hi, I'm Andy
while.
Walvelt. Citizen Watch.
Yeah.
Interested here. Sorry, I've been
No.
checked out for about 6 months on this.
We're glad you're joining us, and we'll take you whenever we can get you. So thank you. So I don't know if you got you've got the agenda and you got all of the items. There should be an item that has some red lines in it. So that's, yeah, take that. You want that. And then you want, there should be red
there we
lines, perfect. Okay, so let's start with the Microsoft Word document, which was put together by one of our CAF members, and then some revisions were included by David. And so I want to just run these documents by the group. I don't know, and you may not have had a chance to read it. I don't know if you guys will have. I have definitely read it, and I'm in agreement with the changes, except for some minor spelling edits. But I know Katie is online, so and Jody, so I want to make sure we hear from you guys as well. So the idea behind, sorry, go on.
Are you gonna talk about the background, how we got to this?
Yeah,
Go for it.
yeah.
I think it'd be-
Okay, yeah, so this Microsoft Word document is, for all intents and purposes, a summary of the 5 priority actions that we would like to put forward to council as a climate action forum to ask council to adopt and direct staff to be moving in the direction of implementing these 5 priorities. And we've even identified actions under all of those priorities that are coming from not only Larkspur's Climate Action Plan, our 2030 Climate Action Plan, but also from the EV Acceleration and Adoption Roadmap, in addition to the, the Marin Countywide Building Electrification Roadmap. So those are 2 additional documents that we together as a group on the side with a little bit of help from AI, tried to take as many actions as we could and consolidate them into ones that we felt were reachable and attainable by the city. And so the Microsoft Word document is like a streamlined summary with that's very digestible, that will be easy to present to council. There is also an Excel spreadsheet which is now, we would like to also talk about adding that into our Climate Action Forum dashboard, which is available to everybody to view online. That would be the new tab that we would add that will show you the overarching categories. There are 5, all in green, and then the underlying actions that we want to put forward to council to have council direct staff to implement over the course of the next, well, through 2026 for sure. But as we're about to enter into the 26-27 fiscal year, maybe we want to consider doing it for the fiscal year that's coming. So these are all topics that we should be discussing tonight. Sorry.
May I add something that I think would be very helpful there? When the content of the Word document and the content of the spreadsheet are exactly the same. This isn't 2 different sets of stuff. They're exactly the same, just in different format. The only other difference is that the Word version has an intro. So I just see people looking back and forth. The content, every one of the 5 priorities and every one of the actions is the same.
That was sort of my question.
Okay.
Aren't they saying, why am I looking at 2 versions of the same thing?
Because we believe it will be easier to present council with the Word document than to have them look at the spreadsheet. And that the spreadsheet will become a progress report as well for reporting back, for staff to report back on the spreadsheet, and it will become part of our climate action dashboard, which is online that everybody can access. We just felt like it was a more streamlined, easier to read, easier to digest document. And it also does have the objective as well as the next steps at the top to make it very clear to council what the objective is.
Okay, well, I would just give my feedback that,
Yeah,
like, I can understand this better than I can understand that.
okay.
Yeah, and for clarity, you were saying I much prefer this format. What I had recommended was the spreadsheet format, but only the first 2 columns. And by doing that, the text would spread out and the whole darn thing could be on one side of one sheet.
Okay, so the other thought, okay, so I don't know, do others have comments online?
I'll let online say something. I was just gonna say that, that I'm assuming that the document online could be consolidated into one long page if you don't include separation on pages because it's digital.
Could be consolidated.
Could
Are
be
you talking about the-
consolidated on one
You're saying
page.
this one?
Like
Which
this could be
document?
consolidated on one page
It
to
could,
the
but-
public because it's digital.
The font would be small.
Oh, yes.
But what I'm saying is for presentation to the council, just the first
Oh,
2
yeah.
columns. For tracking purposes,
Yeah.
then you add in the other columns.
Oh, yeah.
And that
Yeah, I
way
agree.
it would be a familiar format. Everyone has seen it as this, the first 2 columns.
Oh, yeah.
And then it could be, as many pages as we want for all the tracking stuff.
Okay, go ahead, Andy. Yep.
Just that everybody reads, and, there's different ways that people see something.
Right,
Some people
yeah.
are easier for them, some of the other. My own experience last night, I read both of these documents, was exactly what you said. I found people are the same. That's why I was looking back and forth to verify they were the same and had been changes. The spreadsheet's gonna be terrific to be part of the plan over time so that the status can be tracked and all of that, but last night I found it much easier to digest the Word version.
I agree. with
I
you.
don't know, you guys know the habits of your fellow council members better, but I bet you most of them are still like to read on paper.
I think so. I
Or something equivalent.
think also for me, it's easier to read the Microsoft Word document,
I agree.
personally. But one thing we could consider is what I really do like about the Word document is the way it has the objective as well as the next steps
Mhm.
summarized on the top. And then we could have council leverage the actual tab in the CAF dashboard. What was proposed by Katie, who's helped us put this together, was to actually create a tab in our path dashboard, which we've been creating over time. I think you guys are tracking it. Hopefully you've had access to it and been able to see it. This could just be a new tab on it, which would be our 26, 27 priorities as presented to council. And then we could also keep progress. To David's point, we will continue to keep progress on this and have it be a working tab in the dashboard. And you know, it is exactly the same, it's just a different format. So we
I
can
really
present.
didn't mean to derail your
Oh.
thing into formatting question. Sorry about
That's
that.
okay, that's okay. It's good to hear people's input and what's easy for them to read and digest. Katie or Jody, do you guys have any comments online?
No, I think I'm aligned with where we're headed. I would defer to those who are presenting to council around what's the easiest format that they're used to, just to give it the highest chances of success. And I would just echo that the intention of the spreadsheet is for it to become a progress report that would be publicly available and updatable over time. So I think I'm aligned with where we're landing. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. And Lena, do you have any comments or input?
My only thought is just from a progress standpoint, one thing I was maybe expecting to see when I was reviewing certainly the spreadsheet, and maybe there's another version of this that I missed, but sort of the baseline and, you know, the metrics for some of these actions vary, right? In some cases, it's adopting a REACH code, and in some cases, we have, for example, the city fleet objective. So where there's kind of a quantifiable target, or we're starting from, for example, you know, the car, the city fleet, there are 14 vehicles, and 4 of them today are electric, right? So just being able to know what's the starting point, and then we can track progress, because I think otherwise it's hard to compare some of these specific line items. And this is something we can also work on outside of the city approving this, but I also wonder if they will ask where are we today on some of these items. And maybe
Yeah.
Ask that question.
Yeah, Lena,
what's the delta?
I totally agree, if I may. I agree. Having put those columns in, I was starting to ask myself the same question. So I'm glad it was brought up. I do wonder, I know a previous version of this exercise, staff had already kindly taken a look at some baseline sort of, you know, diagnostic of where we are on a different version of this list. Now that we're coalescing on this version, I wanted to ask in this meeting what's feasible for staff to complete before the council meeting, because I agree having that, I mean, I imagine just populating that current column with, you know, a date, you know, as of April 9th, whatever it may be, the current status is X. And I just wanted to ask if that's possible before this goes to council.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. And Dan, that's gonna have to be a question to you. So previously Shannon had worked with the different departments that would be responsible for areas in a previous priority report that we created. What is the possibility of having staff look at this new tab that we've created with the 5 different overarching sections underneath which there are approximately 5 or 6 each actions, to update the current status. So for example, share EV information through newsletters. I'm just looking at number 4, vehicle electrification. And maybe it actually makes sense to talk about the one that we've been talking about with regards to our city-owned vehicles. So item E is adopt and implement city policies to electrify the municipal vehicle fleet on an accelerated timeline. Under current status, we could link to the spreadsheet you've created. And would you think that's reasonable to have that as the current status, or do we need to specifically say we have 20 vehicles of that fleet, you know, 5 exist, 5 are existing electric vehicles, 3 we don't believe will be able to replace, or I'm just using an example. well, how would you as a community want to see a baseline on that? Well, these are such broad broad subjects, so it is hard to sort of pull it into a specific baseline.
I think I'd want to see in progress as a status, and then the status notes have any links, current challenges, setbacks, actions that are currently or have recently happened. Like almost like creating kind of timeline, not necessarily, but like just have it be like updates. Then maybe at the bottom be like last updated March 27th, 2026.
Right, so when a current update occurred.
I do think that to the extent that it is possible to get to a quantified outcome, and I know I annoy everybody with that comment because it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
But I think as just speaking as a CAF member, I think if we're looking at this bi-monthly, it's gonna just feel hard to adjudicate how much progress has been made. When are we, quote, done, right? Like when would this be considered, quote, complete, for example? And so I would push to say, for anything that we simply can't quantify, just acknowledge that and get to, just a regular status would be sufficient. But I would love to at least highlight for our really high priority ones, whatever we can quantify, we absolutely should. And that way we know if we're done. I realize that it's annoying to make that ask of staff because it's a hard exercise. Maybe the compromise is we just select the ones that are most important to us that we really want to make sure we can confidently say is quantified in progress.
It can always be possible to do like in progress and like recent milestone or like something, or either that in status or in current status. There's something like that. Feel like it's not just in progress. Like there's actively being measures to have that, and whether that's in status notes or in general, just having like a milestone relevant. Feel like, oh, they're actually doing something. They're not just saying it's in progress, so they started one thing. So feel like sometimes people get really critical of that.
Okay. I mean, this also begs the question of, are we putting too many priorities first? Do we want to consider prioritizing our priorities and have a top three? Knowing, and part of our discussion tonight was to go through these action items because this was the work of three of us for all intents and purposes, thinking these things are reasonable and we think our staff can accomplish these things. And we haven't yet gotten feedback from staff. So I was also hoping for some of that tonight in our meeting to go through maybe these items. We do have another hour and 10 minutes, and this is the meat of our discussion to say, Dan, from your perspective, we've gone through and we've identified specific actions. Are these achievable by the city? And if so, are they things that are going to take a year, 2 years, or could we achieve them in 6 to 8 months? I mean, could you give maybe if we just talked about the first section, for example, EV charging, could we go through that and discuss, and what would be the ability of the city to update the current status?
Well, it shouldn't be too hard to update the status, although a lot of your specific actions they're not really written in a way that there's a status to assign to them because they're not really measurable truly. So a lot of these are ongoing. Yes, we're doing that, but I don't know what the measurable or quantifiable aspect of this.
Right. So for example, I'm just going to say in A, if we were to say identify one potential private and public.
So I think one of the first confusions for staff with this one is the concept of public EV charging on private and public lands. I'm not sure what that means. So does public EV charging mean anybody can pull up to it regardless of whether it's on public or private property? And then secondly, are you asking for the city to subsidize the installation of EV charging on private land? I think you should clarify things like that before you get too far along, because I know that my focus would be on how can the city comfortably afford to facilitate EV charging on public property.
Right.
I don't really have, unless the council authorizes me to provide a tax subsidy to private enterprise. I don't really have much to say. Property? Well, you have private property.
No, I asked what you said. Just now, did you say private?
No.
I said on public property. I can I know exactly what I could do to bring the council something to say, do you want me to fund a
Well,
project to install on public
But you're
property?
already doing that. You've got all those new spaces at the library, public property. Got all those EV chargers at Piper Park, public property. That's what we're talking about. You're already doing it.
But
I
your
understand, but
question's
the
about private.
wording
You
of this
also said
sentence
private.
includes private property,
Right,
so.
okay, so let's talk about private property. So a developer comes to the city and says, I want to develop this, or I want to resurface, redo my whole parking area. There's an opportunity there for the city to say, just hear me through.
No,
just
wait,
say,
wait, let's stop.
Not
there.
required.
I don't disagree with you, but the lift on what you just said is massive, whereas the lift on putting more chargers at a public parking lot is just money. But the lift on an extraction that I don't have the legal authority to extract
It's
from a
not committing
developer.
to any requirement.
But how do I tell you there's a status? That's what I'm asking you.
It's
What's
easy.
the
I'm trying to
status?
answer the question. If you let me go through it, please. So all I'm saying here is it could be part of the city's standard planning process, or rather permit issuing process, to when a developer comes to the city or an owner comes to the city for private property, it's going to involve parking. It's city policy to simply ask them the question, have you thought about adding EV parking? And we'd like to give you some resources on this. The County of Marin is a great resource, the sustainability team. We'd like to suggest that you give them a call. And if there's something in the permitting process or something about EV charging, we'd be happy to try and work with you. It could be as simple as that. There's a big difference between that and nothing. So there's nothing in here that says the city has to require a private property to do that. But how can you encourage? And I think there are things.
I'm happy to do what you just said, but what's the council's message to the community? Well, we told our staff to tell people, please put in EV chargers, or we added 15 EV chargers to the number of EV chargers in the community. I think the council's going to say, I want a path to the latter, not the former.
I'd say both. Encourage private property to do it and try and do it on public property.
Well,
what we're trying to do is have more chargers everywhere.
And again, are you talking about publicly accessible EV charging on private property? Like, these things have to be clarified.
I can tell you what the intent of this language is. The intent of the language is so at somebody's residence, another resident can't come up and charge on there. But if somebody is like in multifamily housing, to have charging available for all the residents of the multifamily housing. So that's the public that this is referring to, is trying to get large blocks of public, not individual individual single family homeowners, but where there are lots of people, to try and encourage both on public property and on private property development of more EV charging. And I think there are things that city staff could do to help. Obviously, there are some requirements for private that are set out in those state standards. Right. And so that the city's going to be certainly enforcing, right? And so are there some additional things the city could do? Possibly so. Like just encouraging, you're required by our calculation, you must put in 10 EV parking spaces under the 2025 building codes. And we'd like to encourage you to go beyond that. And if you call up Mark Chabria at the county sustainability team, he may be able to link you up to some funding sources that you could do that at no additional expense to you. If that conversation doesn't happen, then you're only going to get the minimum required number. So all this is trying to do is to make it part of the city staff on this particular one to encourage that. It's not saying that it must go out and fund something or something.
I think we're saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to speak to David. How do you want us to report out a quantifiable success other than to say, yes, we do that? If that's all you want, I'm ready to say yes right now. But if what you're saying is I somehow have to tell the staff to document how those conversations all went and report them publicly, I don't know that I want to put that kind of burden on the staff. So what's the measurable positive that staff created a practice where we provide that information? Great, we can say yes to that. right now. But if it's more than that, I just need time to think through what you're asking for.
So let's just, since we're on this one, it's a good example. Let's just read what it actually says. Identify potential private and public sites for EV charging. It's got 3 or 4 elements here. So let me just ask you, has the city developed a list of public sites for EV charging?
Yes.
Okay. What about for private sites for EV charging?
Only to the extent that we're working with developers about their charging.
Okay, so it sounds like you got that done. Develop conceptual cost timelines. So that would be only for the public charging, right?
Mhm.
Keep a prioritized rolling project pipeline list so that, and the intent there is so that it, budget planning time, that list could be pulled out and say, gee, should we move ahead with any of these projects, the parking projects? I mean, here, a perfect example, the library. I remember at the dedication there before, it was said that the charging facilities there could have more, right?
All of the parking spots can have chargers.
Right. So what's the trigger for that?
That hasn't been
So this
decided
would be the prioritized list, if the budget, identifies a capital improvement plan surplus of at least 50,000, consider building additional EV charging, whatever it is. It's just saying develop a plan. And then the last part here, add priority projects for city funding to capital improvements plan. What I just said there.
Mhm.
So
So maybe I'll take a step back. What I would really like to do is have an opportunity to bifurcate public works and planning, because you're really mixing it up and it's going to confuse the staff. And those are 2 separate things. Discussions with developers is a planning operation, and planning for city infrastructure is a public works operation. So
good.
if I can bifurcate some of this and maybe refine it, I'd probably feel a lot better about
Sounds
it.
great. But keep in mind, almost all of these came out of, really, most of them came out of the EV acceleration strategy, developed
I understand.
countywide stakeholders, the whole thing.
We might have a discussion a different day about whether I think highly of some of the people who work for the county, because they do this a lot where they mix department responsibilities up and it gets confusing.
Katie has her hand
Yeah.
raised. Yeah. So I'm gonna let Katie chime in. I think.
Yeah. Hi, sorry. I really like this discussion. And Dan, I think you're raising a lot of really important points. So I just speaking for myself, I would say like to the extent that we can update these so they are as smooth as possible for staff to understand and implement, like to me, that is what Dan, your feedback on how we can make that happen is like deeply aligned with the goals of CAF, right? We want to make this as easy as possible to do. And so David, you would probably agree with me. I think that that's making changes like separating private and public to me make a lot of sense. I would also say if we have time, and I do want to talk about when this is going to council, but it would be great to have your perspective on other areas where that's true, Dan, when time permits, right? There may be other versions of that are lurking in here that I, for one, would want to really separate or adjust to make them implementable. From my personal perspective is like, yes, of course, we've gotten here to it using a lot of strategic references, but I tend to bias toward whatever's easiest for staff to understand and therefore implement. The other comment I just wanted to make was in a previous version of this exercise that we don't need to go back to because I am sensitive to time, we made a distinction between what the highest impact version of the solution is versus the level of effort. And the only reason why I say that is I feel like as you review these, Dan, you can keep me honest, but I bet there's going to be a lot of options here. Like, okay, if we wanted to get to this outcome, there are a bunch of different ways we could do it. Some are going to get us more bang for our buck, so to speak, than others, right? We could take a low effort path, right? Bare minimum, or we could do a high effort path that's going to get us to high impact. That's something I'm actually quite interested in. And I'm trying to figure out here, like, what's the best path to doing that? Because said differently, I don't want to always bias toward the easiest possible operational path if there's a better opportunity to do something that's going to have a better climate impact at the end of the day. And so I realize that we can, if you need us to do some homework, Dan, to like assess it before staff looks at it, I'm happy to take it on. My fear is that we're going to drift toward what's operationally easiest to do and miss some opportunities to prioritize things that might take longer but have a higher impact. And I'm just trying to figure out when's the right time to have that discussion, because I do think that there will maybe things that we want to take a longer, harder path for a more beneficial climate outcome. I'll pause there. Forgive me for throwing wrenches and things, but I'm just trying to get to easy path of implementation while highest impact possible, if that makes sense.
Can I comment? I mean, I think Katie's on the right track for where my brain goes. I think what's missing that we could provide when you're prepared to take this to council are actionable items in staff's mind, which may be very different than this group, right? So, you know, to me, the two bang for the bucks under this category, for example, as council, maybe you want to start parking money to put EV charging in as many public parking spots as possible. And we could start having a plan to roll that out. And then secondly, I think building our partnership with the apartment owners who are limited in how they can install EV charging for their residents because of old infrastructure is the other key thing to help Larkspur.
Can you repeat the last part? Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of our apartments are just too old and their infrastructure isn't set. It's not easy for them to suddenly install the
Right.
modern EV charging components. So we want to work with them to try to solve that. So as you know, we've been having conversations about, would the city be willing to give up curbside parking spaces and have chargers installed there by the private property owner who can't afford to put it into their building. And even though that's a very daunting, expensive investment for the property owner, it's actually probably cheaper than upgrading all the infrastructure in a 1950s apartment building so that every single parking spot is EV ready. So those are the conversations, for example. So I think separate and apart from your goals, which I think in some respects you want to also separate aspiration from actionable items.
Absolutely.
Because you still want to push aspiration, which some of this table pushes that, right? Because you don't want the council or the community to lose sight of longer term visionary goals. But I think staff could give you, these are very actionable things that could happen in the next year or two as sort of a supplement to this.
Yeah, if I can interject on that, I just think that and CAF members, please let me know if you agree, but I think staff's perspective on what they're able to do with a lens toward ambition, right? And maybe then there may be versions where there are options, as I said before, like bare minimum is X, the highest lift is Y. Let's talk about what's priority, right? Like, I think that lens is just the implementation layer that I would love to have. And so I guess just very tactically, does this group think that we need that to go to council? Or is that the work after council approves at this level? Because I could see it working that way too, Dan, if you're comfortable. Like we get the green light on the ambition that's listed here with the acknowledgement that how that comes to life is, it is deeply influenced by staff's recommendation on implementable actions. So we could separate them in order to keep this moving, but I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with that.
Not sure what my answer is, but that's exactly the question that I was posing to myself as I do. This is a mix of aspiration and action. And it's important to keep both elements, but as Katie's saying, it's important to keep them in a way that we can eventually get them to things that can actually, we can make sure get done. And then we can, this whole section of the conversation started with the questions that were raised about what's the baseline and what you raised and how do we quantify that. And so, some of this can be quantified with a lot of work to figure out some clever metrics, and some of it can be more easily quantified.
Can I just add one thing in here? I think one thing we need to be careful of and I've heard this many times, is staff doesn't want to be asked to do things that's beyond their control. I mean, I've heard that many times. That makes sense. And it sort of goes to this, I think, as I'm hearing it, Andy, this aspirational. So there's stuff that the city can do with its own facilities.
Mhm.
You know, the city can seek to electrify or have a plan to electrify X, Y, Z vehicles by some dates, okay? And it gets a lot softer if the city staff is asked to do something that involves the general public as opposed to city staff and city facilities. And yet, a huge point of the climate action plan is that the city has already done most of the things that it can do to reduce its greenhouse gas footprint.
Mhm.
And it's really to get all the residents of the Larkspur. So inherently, there is an aspect of these actions that is, what can the city do to help and encourage residents in Larkspur to take certain actions? And I realize that that's an uncomfortable spot for staff because staff can't control
So
what
let me,
residents do.
can I respond? It's a very comfortable space for the team I've assigned to this group. It's an uncomfortable space for the planning department, because at the end of the day are regulators, like not promoters. But that's why we consciously assigned the administrative staff to this. I've got the team to promote anything you want to be promoted. But it's a little different to tell the planning director, who's there to have a regulatory conversation with a developer. By the way, wink, wink, I bet people like your project a lot better if you talk to this guy at the county about adding more chargers than you're required by law to do. That guy for the county, he doesn't work for his planning department. He works on this, like, I mean, he's in the sustainability team. He's not the regulator. I could have Shannon or her staff people have that conversation very comfortably. So I think that's part of where we're having a disconnect. What I would love to hear from the CAF is we really want the staff to do that. And then let me figure out who on the staff should do it.
That's absolutely yours. I'm just saying that as we're talking about this, I think it's important that we not lose the element of this that's helping, encouraging people outside of the city government to take action, whether it's a developer, it's a private property owner, it's a resident, because that's where we can have the biggest impact, is getting privates to do stuff that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So I just want to make sure that as we're looking through these, you know, however it gets organized in the end, that we don't lose that the actions in here that are less actionable for the city to, you know, get a firm result, but rather are in that help and encourage realm. There's still a bunch of stuff that the city could do to help and encourage. So, and I have no idea, you know, what staff, I mean,
Right.
that's your, I'm not saying who would do what by any means, but I'm just saying, I don't want to lose that
I agree with
aspect of
I
this.
agree with you.
Yeah, okay.
I think we just want to just tell me what you want to sort of generally accomplish, and then I'll figure out who is the right person to do it.
If I can quickly build on that point, David, because I really like it. I think that sometimes, and I'll acknowledge this in my own biases, sometimes if I can't see the outcome right away and it's just like general promotion, I tend to fall into that trap myself of like, is it enough? But it's the right reminder that we are at a stage where, I mean, the city has already done so much. So I agree. I would echo with you. The real change, the real lion's share of the change that needs to happen is with residents. And so the thing I wanted to add, so I'm in violent agreement about that, David. And what I would add is that as we progress with this implementation plan, many of these actions on this table are going to be promotional. And I think it falls to CAF as residents and members of the public, so to speak, to be the amplifying voice that goes further about, you know, the city is going to help us get some baseline promotion down. But I do, again, I tend to wonder if this is the scope of CAF. But speaking personally, I think it's a really good opportunity for like what we as residents can do. Can we do more to also amplify that promotion? Are there things that, you know, are happening in parallel led by residents? And I just, again, I think I'm casting ahead to the next few months when we're going to be in status updates where the city, you know, and staff are going to be dutifully saying, yep, we sent the promotion out. But what are we doing to also amplify that as residents? I think is going to be a key factor to consider. And then the last thing I'll say is, as we sharpen the implementation plan on promotion, David, wherever we can identify the sort of indicators of success, whether it's, and we can get into this later, this does not have to happen before it goes to council in my view, but like, number of opens of that email. I mean, it's corny sounding, but, or can we translate the like number of new EVs registered over time to, some of the promotion work, right? Long way of saying I'd like to get to CAF's participation in helping with promotion and some kind of indicators of success to kind of apply rigor to the promotional element for residents, which we can do as we go.
Yep.
I think having this action plan as a target for end of the year, thinking if we are in December, it's December 31st, and how do we know that we've been successful? I think to Katie's point and to the conversation here, these actions vary in terms of what is the metric and how do we know yes or no, but to the extent we can kind of look at these actions with that lens of how will we know on December 31st whether we made progress. That could be a way that, together with staff and, CAF as a group can align on a framework that the city council can maybe also better understand. Because even if, like, for example, in this EV charging section, we can separate public and private, then we can better quantify what already exists in public charging, engage large employers and multifamily property owners. Maybe the goal, instead of just engaging, is have a playbook, or like have a guide, a resource, and the goal is to create that resource so that anyone can come in off the shelf. And do we have that? I don't know, maybe. So my point is, I think these are all probably the actions are oriented around the right objectives, but maybe there's a way to sharpen each one and figure out how will this be measured? Is it, the REACH code was passed, yes, no, or is it something more specific or unique? And that way, if we can even add a couple more columns, but that way it allows for trackability and for a way to look back and assess, did we make progress? Was this, something that we had challenges with, etc. So just thinking it's April already, and if this is for the calendar year, thinking about that could help also prioritize. But I think from an impact standpoint, I think the message, at least the way I see it, is these green, header goals and objectives have already been identified to be the highest impact areas. And it's a combination of what can staff and city enable to really get the individual residential community to action and be empowered to make these changes that will then trigger the goals.
Okay.
I also think that given that there already are resources in place, such as MC's program for multifamily housing and the county's resources with sustainability and so forth, I think what might be particularly interesting is for us to provide an example of how this community is connecting the dots between some of these other existing resources, and essentially, creating more of a model of, maximizing the synergy, essentially building on, the various means that we can draw on already to accomplish things like energy affordability. I think in terms of the rental population in particular, there's the landlord priority. And I think another ally there is the Marin Rental Properties Owners Association, which MCE has been trying to make inroads with. But if we as a community are also reaching out to our local landlords and connecting them to MCE and other sources of information on tax credits and other things that make sense from the landlord's perspective, but also from the tenant perspective, that's where this is really an important affordability issue. We can lower people's energy use, we lower their carbon footprint, and we lower their energy costs. And that's what I'd love to see, you know, us as a community really kind of help make a difference around.
Right. Do you have something you want to add, Andy? I was going to try to raise us back
Yeah.
up and sort of go on.
You know, that raises a whole bunch of stuff that's what my career is.
What's that?
That's what my career is. It's
Yeah.
not easy. And so I would want to throw that out in a list of things we expect the city to do in the next 6 months. That's been a long time working on that. I think we've identified something really good here, which is that, you know, the things the city directly controls, which is actionable and easy to do, the city understand that, and Dan can directly do that, is a lower impact. And the much larger impact is what we do to encourage outside the city, which is very hard for the city to do. And that's partly a dilemma of success, because the city's done a good job of taking care of its business. One way to think about getting out of that is that, in terms of action items, a lot of this, the aspirational part and the connecting people with resources part, that all falls in the education, really for the city staff, that's in education and outreach, right? You can't do wink, wink, you know, we'll give your project a quick path if you do this, but you can have a package of, you know, a clear outreach program. And that's something that is actionable, that, you know, Shannon's team puts together, that's here's, you know, here are the resources, here's the package, here's the educational thing. And this group and all of the people who are, you know, like me, usually further back, but out there wanting to help, can help promote. And that's maybe a way around, you know, some of the actionable versus inactionable dilemma that you have properly identified with this list. And one other thing I'll say about the list, one other observation about the list, in a way of understanding this and understanding there's two different aspects of all of this stuff, which right now it's kind of mixed up on a line item basis almost, which makes it harder to deal with when you're first looking at it. I agree with you. You know, it's hard to figure out what your actions are. But it's also, this list is also, it's sort of organized on the object basis, the object of these actions, right? We have vehicle electrification, we have EV charging, we have small equipment, and we have the building electrification. Those are the four objects that we're attacking here. Those are the four content areas. And within each one, there's some actionable city resources, city property, easier steps, some little further steps, and then some steps that are so far out of the city's direct purview that are really amount to education outreach stuff that's longer term, that the community needs to really support the city staff on. And that's maybe a way to do what Katie was talking about, of biasing towards what city staff can actually get done, so the stuff actually happens, and we can have some, you know, accountable, measurable progress there, but not lose sight of the aspiration.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is we all want to be able to have a process for the city to be able to report back to us on metrics that can be achieved. We want to understand from city staff what is achievable. So if I were to just take this spreadsheet that we've created that has 5 buckets that we've identified as our priorities, which we believe will be, you know, have the biggest impact on greenhouse gas reductions. And underneath are the actions. We want the city to identify what actions are actually implementable by the city and that the city believes they could report back on metrics on. Which ones are more aspirational, that the city doesn't have enough control necessarily to give us a specific metric on, but could create a resource or a package of information that could be used as part of community outreach and education to then achieve that, be the metric for achieving the goal. So it would be, the city would, and so what I'm thinking, the way I'm thinking about this is that what we're also here to do is to identify what do we want to direct council, to direct staff to do, right? Because CAF is very passionate about implementing our climate action plan, and we want to give a clear message and have some priorities to start moving this ball forward, because we've been, iterating on this conversation, we've been iterating on this plan for a while. So I'm thinking that maybe what we do want to do is start with the overarching goals. These are the 5 goals we've identified, or possibly even considering bringing it down to 3 goals and keeping it more manageable. And then presenting city with the actions, which we've pulled as we've already created, and asking them to come back to, assuming council approves, yes, we believe those priorities should be, the city staff should be directed to look at those priorities and to identify actions within each of those priorities for which they can provide a metric that it's achievable, and here's what they're going to do to achieve it by, if we want to choose December 31st as our date, or what date we choose. And the others, the way city might be able to facilitate movement in this direction, because it's not something city staff has direct impact over, is to create a resource, a playbook, have a policy in planning that anytime a developer comes in to talk about building a new building, it's part of our planning department's responsibility to talk to them about, here are some ways that the city is looking to improve EV infrastructure, and we're talking to all of our developers about this, and trying to understand ways to incentivize you to build more than is actually required by the state law. Am I hearing you guys? Do you think that this would make sense to try to rise up to the top of just using the overarching priorities as a representation, maybe 3 or all 5 to council, present city staff, if council approves those priorities, present city staff with our spreadsheet with the actionable items that we believe will help drive us closer to these goals, and let them, then staff would come back to us with actions that are implementable and metrics and how they'll get to those, and then others that they see as more aspirational and perhaps something they can do from their perspective to provide education and outreach. David?
The reason we have a specific goal under each one of the 5 subjects or objects here is, well, what about that object? What's trying to be achieved? So I think we do want to preserve that for absolutely sure. We spent a lot of time figuring out how to word those. What are we trying to achieve relative to EV charging, building electrification, equipment electrification?
Right.
So that sounds great. However, rather than, I don't know if I heard you quite correctly on this,
Okay.
but rather than just taking those 5, the big goals in the green, and getting council to approve that, none of those, anything will happen. They're totally aspirational.
Okay.
Accelerate. How are we going to do that?
Okay.
The actions that are listed here represent, I would say, thousands of hours of work with large stakeholder groups, including development of Larkspur's CAP, development of the Marin Countywide Building Electrification Roadmap, the Marin Countywide EV Acceleration Strategy. So I am strongly thinking we should keep these actions, because they're not just some made up thing. They represent more work than any of us in aggregate, including staff, is ever going to put into this. So rather than putting those aside, I would say leave those in and have staff then review these. How would they modify these? Or how would they, what specific actions would they take to implement them? Because I mean, this represents, literally thousands of hours of work that we should not turn our back on and come up with some simpler.
Okay. And I think we are saying the same thing.
Okay.
I just wasn't actually going to go through all of the actions. I would tell council that what Climate Action Forum has done is come up with the top priorities, and under each, we've identified actions that we believe will help drive progress towards those overarching priorities. And what we'd like to do is direct the staff to go back and look at our actions and tell us, okay, this one we can achieve, and here's the metric and how we would achieve it. This one we don't believe is achievable by city staff alone, and it requires PG&E, it requires, tenants for multifamily units. But what we could do to help drive this goal forward is create a packet that CAF members, community members could leverage to go talk to owners of multifamily units or owners of large businesses in Larkspur.
When are you thinking this would come forward to the council, or something would come forward?
We were hoping to move it forward next week. That was our.
You're gonna put this on the agenda next week? This one, the table?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think, this is what the discussion is here tonight. I'm not making this decision. We as a group are making this decision. Are we ready to bring this forward to council? My feeling is we've discussed a lot what our priorities are. We've tried to come up with a path that will help bring us closer to those priorities through actionable items that, to David's point, thousands of hours have been spent by county staff building out
Not
these.
just county staff,
and
countywide
experts.
stakeholders,
Yeah,
including some people sitting in this room.
sorry.
It was not county staff that did those things.
No, I'm
Can
sorry.
I make a suggestion, Sarah, though?
Mhm.
I think this will be more informative to the council and the community if, once you say as a CAF, this is the table, I think staff needs a chance to write, this is what we're doing today. This is what we can practically do without budget amendments. This is something we could do, but we need more resources than we have,
Yeah.
right? And I think I would need a few weeks to have that.
And if I may interject briefly, I wonder if the framing is for next week is, I think this framing is possible. I think this is what you're saying, Sarah. We have identified priorities and actions, and we're looking to council to grant us the blessing to move forward into the implementation layer, which will be informed by city staff. I think that's kind of the framing of the conversation, is like what we've been able to do is leverage all of the great resources, work, information to get us to a more focused list that we're really excited about. The next step that we want your, permission to move ahead on is to now move into implementation planning work, which is deeply informed by staff in all the ways that Dan just described. And as and when there are additional council approvals required coming out of that implementation plan, we'll come back with that. But it's more about the framing of this is what we're focused on, with the full understanding that there are a few weeks of work directed by staff to get us to implementation plans that we can execute against.
Katie, what if instead of it's like if and when there's a month or whatever for staff to come back, say, these are the priorities, now I need to build out, as you said, what we've done and I can do now, what's gonna take a little bit, what's a heavier lift.
I mean, almost everything on this list is in progress, right? So the question is more, is in progress sufficient, or would the CAF recommend this council consider throwing more resources at this to make it more robust, right? And that's the next evolution of the conversation.
With that month, though, would you be able to say?
I mean, I could give you a really good summary of here's kind of where we are as a city. Here's what your staff's doing today. And
then some suggested like what we might achieve, because it's
Exactly.
as you're building up what you can do now, what takes a little bit more, what takes a lot more. I think it's also that same stack I was talking about, where what's directly city resources, city actions on city property versus what's city interacting with the public, which is what's just education and outreach. There's that also similar kind of stack from a foundation of what you're doing right now up to where we'd love to go aspiration within each of these. I don't want to call them silos, but these content areas that are identified there. And I'd love to see, and the first whack at it might come well from you working with the committee, like, here's some things that we might be able to hit. We might be able to actually have a package ready to give apartment owners about EV charging. That's an aspirational one, but it's a quantifiable thing. Or, some of it, like, here's we can create the roadmap to getting rid of, leaf blowers and other small gas things here in X years, or whatever it is. Because that's a pretty small defined area, because I'd love to see some metrics put behind it. Adopting all of these things as David's saying, these are important goals. And then if we're going to quantify stuff, what could we really, it'd be worth getting some feedback that may trigger these a little bit in order to get something really quantifiable.
Right, it might, oh, go on.
I was also gonna say, I think the next evolution conversation between staff and the CAF is, these are not Larkspur specific goals. They're just general goals. I would actually want to have a discussion about what's the real problem in Larkspur. So let's go to the first one. Larkspur and Corte Madera actually have the best level 3 charging systems in the whole county. We're actually oversaturated. And but they're all by the freeway.
Yeah.
What we lack, and is the barrier to people buying EVs, is convenient overnight charging. That's what people want. That's what people, when they want to buy an EV, that's one of the things they're looking for. That's a very Larkspur specific problem. And then I can show you on a map, those opportunities are actually very convenient in our newer neighborhoods. It's our oldest neighborhoods that are lacking, particularly the Bonaire Hill or the Pill Hill, depending on what you call it, the Greenbrae Hill. There's just a dearth up there, and there's not good infrastructure up there. So to me, that's the really Larkspur specific discussion that should happen next under this. Is that's a real problem. And then you go to the building electrification. My staff will tell you the biggest barrier to this is actually old houses with old panels and old infrastructure, and people going, I'd really love to have that heat pump, but I can't afford to also. We still have a lot of people that are house rich and cash poor, and the challenge of having to upgrade your panel and your wiring and conduit before you can even install a heat pump, maybe even your ducts. Those are the kinds of things that we could get into conversations about. Okay, now it's a very Larkspur specific discussion. And I think that would be a really powerful place to go next, because you've set these goals, and then you could brainstorm, well, how could we make people aware of resources that might help them out? Or is there a role for the city? David's mentioned the $1,500 loan program. Marin had that for a little bit as a pilot program, but it went away. And the one that still exists is very income restricted.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Maybe the municipalities ought to be talking about sponsoring that very type of program on a limited annual basis, regardless of income, because I think sometimes we are too quick to use income as a barrier, and sometimes in energy issues, everybody wants to sort of get an incentive so they'll make the change.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. I think we could go through each of these in future meetings and really start to drill down on what's very Larkspur specific. Because quite frankly, most of these, we're doing some version of this. We could probably do more with different resources, and if the council changes some of its policies, but
Yeah, Dan, I think you're really honing in on what are the priorities, and I think that they can be quantifiable. I think in terms of numbers of the population that are in rental housing that have EV access, I think we can get a rough idea how many of those are, and then we can make a target of reducing it to some lower number or some lower percentage that are without EV access, something along those lines.
And I think we need to find one or two landlords as being referenced who are willing to take a shot at achieving something. And it needs to be landlords of some of our older properties.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. The new properties that are going to get built, they're going to be electrified and they're going to be offering charging. But some of our older neighborhoods, I mean, it's pretty daunting when you realize how old some of the PG&E systems are in some of our neighborhoods. They can't sustain some of what people even want to accomplish.
So one thing I'm hearing in here is I think this would be a great idea, is what we have down here was developed by CAF, is the step for then staff to go through this and, you know, tune these in terms of what are, and just for clarity, it was never our intent to characterize any of these as things that are not happening. They're all a continuum, but rather to say, these are where we think the priorities are to be: limited staff, limited budget. In terms of greenhouse gas reduction, these are the things where we think the focus ought to be. I mean, there's over 200 items in the climate action plan. We're saying, you know, focus on these 5 specific areas and these 4 or 5 actions under each one. So it's meant to sort of direct these. This is where the Climate Action Forum thinks Larkspur ought to be focused. But there's absolutely then needs to be the step of staff saying, on probably every one of these, how could we do more in this area? Or are we already doing everything that's feasible in that area? So there's definitely got to be that next step for staff to look through this. So I don't know how that gets characterized to the council. You know, is it saying, here's CAF's work product, council, do you agree with the 5? These are CAF's actions. You know, is the action for the council to ask staff to go through these and, you know, identify what it can actually do, you know, where it would tune things, stuff like that. I don't think this is the end point by any means, but I also think it's important not to lose these, because through a whole lot of filters, these have floated up to the top as the place to spend the effort that we're going to spend. This is where we have the biggest impact.
Because even these are pulled from stuff that's actually Larkspur's already signed up to, right? And the
Oh,
climate
for
action
sure.
plan has a
Oh,
lot more
for
stuff
sure.
than this.
I doubt that there's a single thing in here that Larkspur isn't doing something on, but there are many of them that Larkspur could do more.
Right.
And the what could it do more on any one of these? I think that's where staff has to look at it and say, well, we could do this and we could do this. But it's the council that has to say, yes, staff, we really want you to do more on this. So we can't come up with the specific things.
Maybe your current comment could be integrated into this goal language here to just clarify that this is meant to be like the next step of this list is to then get the feedback from staff.
Well, that would be in this last part here. Katie had it called goal.
Yeah.
I changed it
that's
to next steps.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe then.
Gain approval of council to prioritize actions below for attention into 2026. Once approval is gained, members of Climate Action Forum request staff and members of the community aim to complete or make significant progress towards completion. So probably there's a missing step in there, which is the part for staff to go through this list and make, you know, I don't know what identify, you know, what's feasible, what additional actions, what's already in play, and develop some metrics around these, you know. So that sentence probably should be added in there, something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the next step, is to like frame that up as I keep calling it an implementation planning layer, just because I think that language makes sense to me, but we can call it whatever we'd like. And I think updating that document might hopefully, Sarah, help prepare for the council meeting, so it's really clear what we're asking. And I'm happy to take that as a next step.
Yeah, I was just trying to type something up too right now, but I would agree. I think we're all in agreement that we've identified our priorities, we've identified actions, we've, you know, brought down what amounts to about 200 plus actions in all of these different documents, to, you know, a group of approximately 25 actions that we believe would be the best place for staff to spend their time in order to achieve some of these goals. Now we're asking council to approve our priorities, whether or not they, you know, bless our priorities, and then give direction to staff to go back, review the actions under each of the different priority categories, and come back with a plan for, or come back with a report or an update. I mean, we kind of want let's see, what we want is a multiple stage, something that suggests, okay, we're already making progress here, and here's what we've completed on these. So we need them to come back to us with a reporting mechanism that tells us what's been completed, what is sort of outside their purview and is, perhaps, what's the right word for this? Aspirational. But what they might be able to do, from a, standpoint of providing something.
That's where the education and outreach
Yes.
happens and the research and that the community can help
Yeah,
provide, the city can put into.
and as Katie's calling it, like implementation timelines or implementation plans on how to achieve some of these actions.
But maybe if, we're gonna have things to a meeting soon, maybe we can take the win. There were hundreds of actions, they've been
Yeah.
pulled down to 20 or 25, so the
Yep.
goal is still the goal. And then the next step is, and you get the council to say, yes, these 20, whatever they are a worthy culmination of, we trust the work this group has done, this
Right.
does
Right,
effectively summarize, prioritize out of the hundreds. And the next step is to get to specific quantifiable action that we can actually track progress on. Staff is gonna take another whack at this and work with staff to, so maybe we take that win and then move to, so we
Right.
have both the goal and the next step.
right.
I like that. That makes sense to me.
Say that part out loud. Does it make sense for staff to work with CAF as far as part of that, or are these separate steps?
I see them as separate steps. They're gonna take the work we've done, go back and review it and come back to us with implementation details of what can and cannot be achieved and how they would achieve that in terms of what the metric would be. But that's how I'm hearing it.
That's for the next.
And then bring it back to us at CAF, right? In our next meeting would be in June. Or sooner.
Is that
I would
consistent with
prefer
what
it
you're
for it to be sooner, but
Yeah,
And
I
that
think
would
some
be-
of these aren't very metric oriented, so we might need to have more discussion about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of
of
it's like Sarah said, right, some are
aspirational.
aspirational, and that's where the education outreach comes in.
So I want to just throw out one other idea, process-wise here. These are, and I think the staff review and recommendation steps very important. But the other thing is, almost every one of the actions that are listed here, there's probably a lot of ideas of how it could be accomplished.
Mhm.
And I generally agree with your statement, staff needs to take it, we've worked on it, staff needs to work on it. But I do think in terms of, it would be good to mine our collective thinking of ideas for how to implement this stuff. I mean, your staff looking at it for sure, but I just bet if we just spent seriously 3 minutes on each one of these actions, I'm not proposing this for tonight necessarily, and just said, brainstorm, what are ideas of how that could be implemented, that action? And what if any metrics can be applied? I'm just saying, we've got a group of people here that, Lena may come up with a great one on that
Right.
one that I had no clue, whatever,
Right,
and Brooke, and we're all looking at it from a little different perspective.
absolutely.
So I would just, somewhere in there, it might be a good idea to do that step.
So how do you propose that we would take that step outside of another CAF meeting? Because we don't want to wait 2 months, right?
Yeah,
We don't
no,
want to
no,
wait
it
till
can't be
June
2
to
months.
have that conversation. So we're at, well, we only have, about 14 minutes left. That's my question is, how do we, we need to move, we need to get moving, right? So we need to take something to council for approval. And I think we're all in agreement of what we take to council for approval is, here is our priorities. We've identified actions. To Andy's point, our win is there are over 200 plus actions in these multiple documents that took thousands of hours for experts and staff to create, and we've taken it down to about 25. And now the direction that we would like to ask council to approve is to have staff go work on implementation capabilities or
Less
possibilities.
the 25 and come back and give us start to break it down into an action plan.
Yes, thank you. And then, the thing that trips me up is like Dan's first comment about, well, you have private and public listed here. Teasing out the language of each of these actions, I don't know how much time that's gonna take you, But, you know, it's how important is that, right? Getting into the exact language that we've written, I don't want it to trip you guys up from being able to, I mean, as you and David had a back and forth conversation, David said, well, you've already been doing this, obviously, with our library parking and, you know, so I'm concerned about how you guys might get tripped up on the language of the actions and not have input from us to say, how are you defining this? What are you really expecting from us when you say this action A or B? Sorry. Does that make sense when I'm?
Yeah, it does. And I just want to caution the group. Implementation has its limits, and one of my roles will be to be a barrier. There's only so much. Even the council doesn't have the authority necessarily to always tell the staff how to do things. The goal is to set the objective, and then staff figures out how to achieve the objective.
Right.
So implementation would be suggestions, maybe not necessarily directive, because then we get in a problem. Because remember, this is just one of hundreds of policy objectives that the staff has to balance and figure out how to prioritize limited resources for. So I think everything's achievable. I'm not proposing that there's resistance. I would just, the more you can focus on, this is what this would look like to us, right? And it's the outcome oriented and the output oriented comments. The easier it will be for staff to say, okay, I get it. Let me come back with 2 or 3 ways to achieve that.
Yeah. So does anybody have any comments on that? Because I certainly have a couple of comments on that.
I have one comment. To exactly the point that Dan was just saying, like on that first one, where the action combines public and private, they can break it down to 5 specific things, some of which are public and some of which are private. I don't know that we need to scramble this very much at this point. I mean, that would be my take.
I think the one I most will need future refinement from the group. There's a lot of things in here where I'll say promote, educate. Those are really undefined concepts, right? So is promotion a monthly email? Is it a flyer at the building counter? Is it both? But I mean, we should talk through at a future point what some of those look like to people.
That's exactly the brainstorming that I was just talking here, that I was proposing a minute ago. Is just throw out exactly those ideas that you just said. Just go through them and pick 2 of them and say, okay, those are the 2 we're going to focus on.
Because those are the ones that don't have good metric. They're not measurable, right? Promotion is promotion, and I might have a different idea
right.
How much promotion is enough, and then you do. And so that would be one we'd probably, as a staff, need more guidance on what people's expectations are. That type of stuff. And there's several of them like that, but things that say adopt and do this and do that, we can come back and tell you how quickly we can turn those things around. I do think a few of these have the words accelerated timeline, and that probably has to be talked about because my accelerated timeline might not be your accelerated timeline.
So the key words that I heard you just say, the promotes, looking for some guidance on that.
Things that really,
Ideas.
yeah, what does that look like to you?
And then presumably down in the public outreach, those are more specific.
Well, it's also, you know, for example, under building electrification, item D says promote electric appliance
Yeah,
benefits.
it shows up 3 times.
Okay.
I mean, you know, is it enough for us to build a dedicated web page, right? Okay. Or is that goal 1 and then we chat some more and we have goal 2 and goal 3?
Well, like an example on promote on any of these is the climate corner in the manager's newsletter. That's great. Continue it. Great job. Gold star on that one. No, it really is good.
No, I love it too.
You know, so all
I'd
this
like it to be
says
on
is
top more often.
keep doing that. Council says, keep doing that. We like that.
I think I have it on every other meeting,
On top.
issue on top.
Okay.
Remember that on top, we know a certain percentage only read the first 3.
Yes.
So we have to
Yes.
prioritize occasionally.
So Katie, you have your hand up. Are you wanting to say something?
Yeah, just forgive me. I want to make sure I'm understanding. So I think it'd be great. So Dan, are you saying that it would be helpful to have us throw out ideas? Am I hearing you correctly? Because I think that would be relatively easy for us to generate offline. We don't want to be, throwing spaghetti against the wall too much, but specifically, yeah, so I could just clarify that a little bit.
I could probably highlight for you the ones that it's not clear to me what would be a desired outcome. So
Great.
The ones that say promote, for example, we'd love to get feedback, and then we could sort of say, okay, that's really doable, or that I need to go get resources for. I don't have necessarily the bandwidth for that.
I think that's great. Yeah, if you highlight them, we'll give you ideas.
Right, and then like I said, a lot of these other ones, code amendments, policies, those are just staff doing some drafting and looking at what other cities have done. And that's another valuable thing for the whole CAF. If you've seen something in another city, don't try to interpret and tell us about it. Just say, hey, have you read this thing that San Anselmo did? Or have you read this thing that Novato did? It's fantastic. Why don't you guys take a look at it? Because that's actually easier for my staff to just go, oh, yeah, I could do that, kind of thing. So.
Okay, so what I'm hearing now is that we're all in agreement about this should be taken to council next week with the priorities and the actions, asking for council's blessing to have staff go back and review it and make recommendations on what they can achieve. Prior to that, Dan, do you want us to tighten up some of this language, or should that be part of the exercise where you're going to highlight parts where I'm not clear what your objective is here?
I wouldn't change the language to just take this to council and say, this is where we are.
Yeah.
And we want your general blessing that these are going to be our priorities.
Okay.
I think refining these individual specific actions and providing defined goals, we can make that a dynamic process over time, right?
Okay.
And like I said, I can go through and work with a couple staff people and say, well, we can do that tomorrow. We're not really sure how this is measurable. So what does the group think this looks like? What would be your thoughts on how to do
You think it's a
promotion?
valuable next step, you were saying,
Which
would like to see staff come back
Oh,
and,
for sure.
yeah. I tend to think so as well.
But I think if the council next week said, you're on the right track, these 5 look like great priorities, that's the kind of direction where staff would then know, okay, we get it. This is what we're working with.
Okay, and so in order to have that feedback loop, a continuous feedback loop where we don't have to be waiting until our next CAF meeting, is that something we're doing in just the email distributions that I've been sending out? Is that how you guys want to be able to provide input? I'm not sure what the best way to go about this, staff being able to gather input from CAF short of another CAF meeting, and we definitely don't want to wait until June. Sorry.
Just a thought, you started out our meeting tonight by noting that the Climate Action Forum was formed a year ago.
Yeah.
If you think back at the discussion of forming the Climate Action Forum, it was like, let's try this format and see how it works out. So maybe given sort of the urgency around this, if it goes to council next week or whenever the next council meeting is, maybe we could have a special CAF meeting. It's not required that they be every other month.
Right.
That was just a starting point. Let's try this and see how it works. So I would propose maybe we have another meeting after the council meeting, assuming the council approves, give staff the time they need to go through. And then why don't we schedule a special CAF meeting, maybe in 1 month, to do that exact review.
Okay.
Because I agree, 2 months is too long.
It's definitely, I agree. So that could work, absolutely. And I just, I know people have now gotten used to the every other month, and so are probably hopefully putting aside time to be available.
Well, we could still
Finding
do
a
the
way
every
to
other
get
month.
everybody together next month.
I'm just saying have a special meeting
Yeah,
in between the 2 regular.
right. That's still gonna require herding cats. It's not gonna be easy. So I want to have just a secondary backup. Like, are people willing to work through email to do? And is that a scalable and reliable way to communicate ideas and suggestions? If we can't,
I don't think so, because this is the sort of thing where it's a group sort of thing. I mean, like I was talking about earlier,
Mhm.
you know, where you need to have the conversation, which is almost impossible. to
Right,
do.
right.
But you could have easily made those comments you made
But
about the
then what do you do with
one
it?
on a Google Doc and made them as comments on that. And you said these three things could work. I think, you know, that's not an unreasonable way to communicate.
I don't know how you get to resolution though. You
Well,
kinda
Well,
need to
then
do
you,
it-
then you probably have that meeting that
Right.
Sarah's talking about.
Right, assuming we can get everybody together for a meeting. I mean, we could potentially just meet on Zoom, which
Ask
might
this
make it a
group,
lot
would this
easier.
group be willing to have a special meeting in a month approximately?
Yeah, I would, but I'll have to say Wednesday nights, the second Wednesday, I always have another meeting commitment, so
Right,
this is a tough night for me.
okay,
So if there was another night on Wednesday, second, you know, particularly the second Wednesday of the month, a better conflict.
okay. We also have, I did want to bring this up quickly, is we have a beautiful new facility with lots of meeting space inside, and I'd really love for us to take advantage of the new meeting
Yeah.
space.
Yeah,
So I'd like to propose that we, moving forward, meet at the library. How does everybody feel about that?
Good.
Yeah,
That sounds
good.
great. I just for what it's worth, I'm in favor of meeting again in a month and whatever work we can do async. I want to move this quickly. So if we can do email successfully plus an additional meeting, I'm in. The more the merrier.
okay. All right, so what I'm hearing are next steps is this gets brought to council. It then, if the council blesses it with these priorities and actions, it goes to staff. Staff will have time to review it, and I suppose staff, you will give us some idea of how much time you think you'll need to review it, and then it will be an iterative process through email, so we can start commenting and providing more clarity on what maybe goals or objectives we're trying to achieve through these different actions. And then I would set up ideally another meeting for us to meet, a special meeting in May, at which point we can try to crystallize what our objectives and goals are with any questions that have come from staff. Is
If that
that,
could be scheduled so that there's kind of a more definitive work product from staff to, you know,
Yeah,
a few days before that meeting or whatever, so that we have something more, because that's,
we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I would encourage you and I can work on, but I think you should describe this to the council as a living document, right? The verbiage might change,
Yeah.
the goals are the same, but as we come to understand these, we might refine the actual words to better drill down to what we want to accomplish. Meaning, I don't think you want to tell the council, you adopt this, and that's the static document, it's just living there, and it can't change till we come back to you and
okay,
tweak it again, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
what you want them to say is, hey, we trust staff and the CAF to kind of massage this as they go along, as long as the overarching goal is still
Okay.
the overarching goal.
okay. So we could just call it a draft or a working document.
I think I'd call it a working living policy document, and just, you know, because the action items may change too. Some of the, you know, just because we bang out A through D on one of these doesn't mean the CAF won't think of a new one and want to pursue that. And
Okay.
does it need to go back to council? Only if there's a budget problem, right? I mean,
Right. Anybody have any input or comments on that? Katie?
Sounds good to me. Sorry.
No, it's okay. David?
It sounds okay. I think it needs to be flexible as long as it doesn't wander too far away from what we've got written down here. And one other thing, just in terms of time, Dan asked for ideas around the items that have promote. So
Yeah.
what's our time frame for that? Like, when would you like those by, so that can be.
Yeah, if
part
you
of
have
it?
some examples that you think, hey, they did a really good job promoting, just shoot them to us and we'll
Yeah.
take a look at them.
What time frame? Next week?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Copy Shannon,
okay.
or send it to Shannon and copy me. Let's put each other back in the right spot.
When is Shannon back?
I know she's back in the United States next week, but I don't know. I can't, I gotta
Not
double
in the
check
next-
when she's
not
coming
soon,
in the
actually, sounds
office.
Okay.
So she didn't just go on
She'll be here
leave, she
for our
left the
next
country.
council, she'll be here for our next council meeting.
In May, maybe?
Oh.
Not next week.
Okay,
She won't be at that meeting.
okay. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Sorry to keep you over. Brooke, thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
sure.
Yeah, and I just want to check, you have Brooke's contact information, so you can notify her of our next meeting.
Yeah, I don't have it yet. I
No,
would
no.
like to get it.
Yeah, sure.
And Brooke, what's your last name?
Hanson,
H-A-N?
S-E,
A-N.
for being stalked.
Well, I have to say, I'm really glad you
I
were
know.
here. You're always welcome here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it Brooke with an E
Yes,
and Hanson with an E?
yes,
Okay. And what is your email, Brooke?
30@gmail.com.
Say it again?
Brooke Hanson 30@gmail.com.
Oh, 30.
So
Okay,
just
okay. Yep, thank you.
No connection to 30 whatsoever.
And
They just
you
happen to
said-
be the number that.
You're the 30th Brooke Hanson who wanted that email address. No,
Can you
it was
spell your
chosen.
first name?
BROOKE.
Okay, just want to make sure I got it
Two-way interview. Hi.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. You will be receiving some emails likely, and then I will look for a date for May for a special meeting so that we have it tentative and we can put it on our calendars and prepare for it. And we will plan to meet in June for sure, hopefully May as well at the library. Take advantage of our beautiful new resource. So have you seen our new library?
Yes, I have. I was not the one covering it for
Barb?
the opening of it,
Yeah.
but I was there. It was,
But hopefully you'll get some use out of it.
yes, I'd love to. It's so close to Redwood and it's great. And for some reason, my computer will only connect to the Corte Madera Town Council Wi-Fi, nowhere else except for my house. It won't connect to Corte Madera Library anymore, Pete's, Phil's, anything. I don't know why. So hopefully it connects there, because if I can find another place where it works, that'd be great.
Yes, that would be
So-
great. Speaking of which, you were gonna tell me, how do I change this?
Yeah, no, I was good.
I was gonna
You-
say,
you-
you're the
I
one
see.
who-
were gonna ask her all those questions.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shut down.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna hop. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for a great
Thank you.
discussion.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
you.
We'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.